The stage lights blazed down on the Fox News set, where Jesse Waters sat in his familiar posture. Leaning back, smirk painted across his face, ready to dominate. He spoke over Jasmine Crockett before she had even finished her first thought. One interruption. Then another. By the third time, his laughter was louder than her words. The audience at home could feel it, that creeping sense of unfairness. The weight of arrogance pressing down. Waters wasn't debating. He was bulldozing. Crockett, however, didn't flinch. She kept her composure, her eyes steady, her tone unwavering even as his dismissive interruptions stacked higher. 4, 5, 6 times, each one a jab designed to make her seem small, powerless, unheard. But Crockett wasn't powerless. On the 7th interruption, viewers leaned closer to their screens. By the 8th, her supporters online were already typing furiously, hashtags forming in real time. By the 9th, the tension was unbearable. Waters chuckled, convinced he had silenced her completely, convinced that his interruptions had buried her point beneath noise and bravado. Then Jasmine Crockett leaned forward. Her eyes narrowed, her voice calm but electric. She had been counting not the interruptions, but the moment, the exact second when she would unleash the sentence that would cut through his arrogance like glass shattering. The studio air seemed to shift. Even Waters, for the briefest flicker of a second, looked uncertain. And in that silence, as millions watched, Crockett delivered her 10th sentence. Freeze frame. The narration sliced in. Nobody expected what her 10th sentence would do. It wasn't just a reply, it was a reckoning. The audience at home gripped their remotes tighter. Commentators, journalists, and rivals alike would later admit they hadn't seen it coming. One line from Jasmine Crockett, delivered with precision, would erase 9 interruptions and turn the entire exchange upside down. Because sometimes, all it takes is one voice cutting through the noise to remind everyone who truly holds the power. And when she spoke, the silence was deafening. It was 2025, and America was a nation split down the middle. The debate stage at Fox News had become less of a place for dialogue and more of a battlefield. A stage where words were weapons, interruptions were strategies, and humiliation was currency. And at the center of this storm sat Jesse Waters, the self-styled firebrand of Fox, smiling as if the entire spectacle existed for his amusement. Waters was no stranger to confrontation. He thrived on it. His career was built on interruptions, quick jabs, sarcastic laughter, and the art of drowning out his opponents before their points could land. For years, he had turned this tactic into theater, cutting off senators, professors, and activists alike, all while reinforcing his reputation as Fox's master of mockery. To his fans, it was dominance. To his critics, it was a display of arrogance and disrespect. But on this particular night, his opponent wasn't just another guest. She was Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, a rising Democratic star whose voice had begun to resonate far beyond her Texas district. Known for her sharp wit, fearless comebacks, and ability to flip an insult back on her opponent in seconds, Crockett represented something Waters wasn't used to: resistance that couldn't be bulldozed. That's why this debate mattered. It wasn't only about politics. It wasn't only about the clash of a right-wing firebrand and a progressive fighter. It was about something deeper, something symbolic. Every interruption that rolled off Waters' tongue wasn't just a tactic. It was a symbol of how women, particularly women of color, are silenced in the halls of power, in the media, and in public life. Each smirk, each dismissive laugh wasn't merely about Crockett. It was about every viewer who had ever felt cut off, overlooked, or ignored. As Waters interrupted her again and again, millions watching felt the insult sting personally. Crockett wasn't just defending herself. She was carrying the weight of everyone who knew what it meant to be silenced. That was why her composure mattered. That was why her steady gaze, her refusal to rise to the bait, mattered, because she wasn't just debating Waters. She was embodying the struggle for dignity in the face of arrogance. The nation could feel the tension rise with each exchange. Supporters of Crockett leaned forward, waiting for her to strike. Fans of Waters chuckled, certain he was in control, but beneath the surface, something was shifting. The more he interrupted, the more he exposed the emptiness of his spectacle. And the more Crockett waited, the more powerful her eventual response would become. This wasn't just about a sentence. It was about a reckoning. The camera zoomed in, the crowd fell into uneasy silence. And every viewer at home could sense it. The clash unfolding here wasn't entertainment. It was a test of respect, of patience, of whether arrogance could truly Silence dignity, asterisk, but to understand the power of Crockett's 10th sentence. We need to see what came before. Jesse Waters built his career on interruptions. Long before the 2025 debate stage, he had mastered the art of smirking through other people's sentences, slicing through their arguments not with facts, but with ridicule. From his early days as Bill O'Reilly's protege, he learned the Fox News playbook: dominate airtime, mock your opponent, and turn every exchange into a performance. For Waters, debate wasn't about persuasion, it was about winning the moment, creating the clip. Feeding the spectacle asterisk, he rose to prominence by ambushing people with a camera and a microphone, then editing the footage to maximize their embarrassment. His man-on-the-street stunts weren't journalism. They were gladiatorial games where the only goal was to make himself look clever at someone else's expense. That habit followed him into the studio, where guests quickly learned that Waters wasn't listening to their answers. He was waiting to interrupt, to twist their words into punchlines, to turn their expertise into fodder for a smirk. Asterisk, time and again, he belittled academics, activists, and even fellow politicians. When a scientist tried to explain climate change, Waters cut him off with jokes about the weather. When an activist spoke about racial injustice, he dismissed them with sarcastic chuckles. His tactic was simple: derail the conversation before it could threaten his narrative. If the guest made a strong point, Waters raised his voice and drowned it out. If they stayed calm, he mocked their tone. If they fought back, he smiled wider, playing the victim of their supposed anger. Asterisk, it worked because the spectacle was the point. Viral clips didn't require depth, they required conflict, and Waters knew how to stage it. Every interruption became proof to his fans that he was fearless, that he could own the other side. But beneath the smirk, there was something else: fragility. His dominance relied not on his ability to argue, but on his ability to prevent others from arguing. His strength was, in truth, a shield for his weakness. Asterisk, critics saw through it. They called him arrogant, condescending, a man who confused airtime with authority. But on Fox, arrogance was a brand. He leaned into it, convinced that constant interruption meant control. Night after night, he repeated the pattern: laugh, cut off, dominate, bask in applause from the like-minded. His ego grew with every segment, each one reinforcing the belief that he could silence anyone if he just talked loudly enough. Asterisk, yet there were cracks, moments when the smirk faltered. When faced with opponents who refused to play his game, his interruptions grew frantic, repetitive, less clever than desperate. The more he leaned on the tactic, the more transparent it became. He was less a sharp debater and more a man terrified of letting someone else finish a thought. Asterisk, and that was the core of Jesse Waters' arrogance, the belief that control of the microphone meant control of the truth, that cutting someone off was the same as proving them wrong, that domination of seconds on air meant domination of ideas. But history shows the opposite. Arrogance built on noise collapses the moment it's confronted with clarity. Asterisk, on that night in 2025, Waters walked onto the stage carrying the same bag of tricks: the smirk, the interruptions, the certainty that if he just talked over Jasmine Crockett long enough, she would stumble, or lose her composure, or be reduced to a caricature. He had done it before. He expected to do it again. Asterisk, but what he didn't account for was that Crockett had studied this kind of arrogance her whole life. She knew what it looked like, how it operated, and what it revealed. Every interruption only sharpened her composure. Every smirk only underlined his insecurity. Waters thought he was running the show. In reality, he was digging himself deeper into a trap of his own making. Asterisk, because arrogance built on interruption is no match for clarity delivered at the right moment. Jasmine Crockett's path to that 2025 stage was anything but easy before the cameras, before the microphones, before the viral moments. There was a young woman who had to fight for her voice to be heard. She wasn't born into power, nor was she handed a platform. She built it the hard way, through persistence, sacrifice, and a refusal to accept the limits others tried to impose on her. Asterisk, her earliest battles were in classrooms where her intelligence was doubted, her confidence mistaken for arrogance. Teachers and peers sometimes underestimated her, assuming she would back down when challenged. But Crockett didn't back down. She studied harder, spoke louder, and sharpened her words into tools. Even then, she was learning how to fight interruptions, not on TV, but in life itself. Asterisk, when she became an attorney, the interruptions didn't stop. They grew louder. Courtrooms filled with voices that tried to diminish her presence, judges who overlooked her, opposing counsel who dismissed her arguments, colleagues who questioned her abilities. But every attempt to silence her only made her more deliberate, more precise. She trained herself to speak with the weight of evidence, to deliver lines so tight they could not be ignored. If others raised their voices, she slowed hers down, ensuring every word cut through the noise. As an activist, she discovered that interruptions weren't just personal, they were systemic. She saw how entire communities were silenced. Women brushed aside, minorities drowned out, truth itself twisted into background static. She became not just a lawyer, but a defender of voices to often denied space. To her, every interruption was a mirror of injustice. Every dismissal of her words a reflection of a larger struggle. And so she embraced a mission to be more than her own advocate, to speak for those still waiting to be heard. Her rise into politics was powered by that mission. On the campaign trail, she didn't lean on slogans, she leaned on stories. The stories of single mothers juggling the jobs, of immigrants navigating a hostile system, of young people told they didn't belong. She carried those voices with her, and when opponents tried to mock or diminish her, she stayed calm, because Crockett knew, the louder they laughed, the more they revealed their fear. Her presence became her power in a sea of bluster and bravado. She stood as a figure of control, measured and unshaken. Commentators called her razor sharp, noting how she could dismantle an argument in 10 words or less. Audiences felt it too, that rare combination of dignity and fire. She didn't need to shout to command the room. She let silence work for her until her words landed like a gavel. And yet, her journey was never free of doubt. She carried scars from years of being underestimated, of being told not now or not enough. She knew what it was to prepare endlessly and still be cut off mid-sentence. She knew the sting of hearing her ideas repeated back to her by a louder man, applauded as though they were his, but she never allowed bitterness to consume her. Instead, she turned doubt into discipline. She learned when to wait, when to strike, and when to hold her ground with nothing but composure. By 2025, Crockett had become more than a congresswoman. She was a symbol of respect in an era where respect felt endangered. A rising star not because of theatrics, but because of her precision. She didn't just clap back, she carved through nonsense with surgical clarity. For young women, immigrants, and marginalized voices, she was proof that you could be silenced 100 times and still make the 101st time unforgettable. That night, when she faced Jesse Waters, she carried all of this with her. The lawyer who had argued against dismissive judges, the activist who had refused to be drowned out, the congresswoman who had stared down political attacks without blinking. Waters thought interruptions could derail her. What he didn't understand was that interruptions had built her. Every smirk he flashed, she had already seen in 100 different forms. From dismissive professors to arrogant politicians, every attempt to talk over her only reminded her of why she was there, to embody dignity where others chose mockery, to represent calm where others thrive on chaos. And so, when she leaned forward that night, preparing to deliver her 10th sentence, the room did not just see a politician responding to a pundit. They saw the weight of years spent proving herself, the strength of communities she carried, the quiet fury of someone who had earned every second of her voice. This wasn't just another TV debate. It wasn't just another interruption. It wasn't just another smirk. It was her chance to turn humiliation into history. The stage lights bore down with the kind of heat only live television could generate. Fox News branded banners framed the set, cameras swooping in on every gesture, every expression. The stakes were clear. This was not just a debate, it was a spectacle. A battle designed for sound bites and viral clips. Jesse Waters leaned back in his chair, wearing the same smirk that had carried him through years of cable television. Combat. He had a rhythm, and tonight he was leaning on it harder than ever. As soon as Jasmine Crockett opened her mouth to respond to the moderator's question, he pounced. Now, hold on. He cut in, waving a dismissive hand as if swatting away her words before they had even formed. The first interruption drew polite laughter from his base in the crowd. Crockett didn't flinch. She adjusted her mic and tried again. But Waters wasn't done. He interjected a second time, louder, mocking the cadence of her response. The laughter grew bolder now, feeding off his performance. Crockett paused, lifted her chin slightly, and simply blinked. She wasn't rattled. By the fifth interruption, the mood had shifted. What had started as comedy for Waters fans was curdling into unease for others. Viewers at home, and even some in the audience, began to sense the imbalance. It wasn't debate anymore, it was harassment dressed as entertainment. Crockett's calm restraint was becoming its own kind of power. Her silence heavier than his words. Asterisk still, Waters pressed on. By the 7th time he cut her off, his voice had grown sharper, almost desperate. He leaned forward now, eyes narrowed, speaking over her with a barrage of accusations and half-jokes. The moderator tried, weakly, to intervene. It didn't matter. Waters was chasing dominance, chasing the clip he thought would trend. Asterisk in Crockett. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't roll her eyes. She let the storm rage, her posture unbroken, her gaze steady every time she tried to begin again. He barreled through, but with each attempt, the tension in the room swelled. 9 times. 9 dismissive interruptions, each one a mirror of every boardroom, every courtroom, every dinner table where women, especially women of color, are told to wait their turn. The audience shifted uncomfortably now. Some muttered, some shook their heads. Even those who had laughed earlier were beginning to see the act for what it was: arrogance. Unmasked, Crockett's hands rested calmly on the table. She hadn't raised her voice, hadn't lashed out. Her restraint wasn't weakness, it was discipline. She was letting the weight of his interruptions build, brick by brick, until the structure of his arrogance towered above him, and when it toppled, everyone would see it. The air grew heavy with anticipation. Waters leaned in again, mouth open, ready to pounce the 10th time. His smirk flickered into something closer to a sneer. He thought he was winning, dominating airtime, controlling the narrative. But in that moment, the audience wasn't laughing anymore. They were holding their breath, waiting. The interruptions had stretched the tension to a breaking point. Crockett leaned forward at last, her voice low but sharp enough to slice through the noise. Then came the 10th moment, and Crockett finally spoke. For 9 interruptions, Jesse Waters had controlled the noise. But noise is not power, and Jasmine Crockett knew the difference. When the 10th interruption came, she didn't raise her voice, didn't snap back, didn't take the bait. She leaned in, calm, almost amused, and let a small, knowing smile flicker across her face. Well, Jesse, she began, her tone light but laced with steel. I didn't realize you invited yourself here to play referee, or is it just that you're scared of what I'm about to say? A ripple of laughter moved through the audience. It wasn't roaring applause yet, but it was a shift. For the first time that night, Waters wasn't dictating the rhythm. He tried to interject again, but Crockett raised a finger slightly. Not in anger, but in precision. The crowd caught it. The moderator caught it. And for the first time, Waters faltered. See, this is the pattern, she continued, her voice steady. Every time a woman, every time a black woman, steps up with the truth, suddenly the rules change. Suddenly, we're not allowed to finish a sentence. Suddenly, the goal is to drown us out. Because if you actually let me speak, Jesse, your audience might hear something real. Gasps. Murmurs. The weight of her words settled like a hammer. On the table between them, Waters shifted in his chair, his smirk tightening into something forced. He glanced at the moderator, as if searching for rescue, but the moderator stayed silent. Crockett didn't stop. She pressed forward, building her cadence with precision. You've built your career on soundbites, on interruptions, on mocking people who don't look like you or think like you. But here's the thing, when the cameras go off, when the lights fade, those little tricks don't solve a single problem. For the people watching at home, they don't pay the bills, they don't keep our kids safe, they don't fix our democracy, all they do is feed your ego. The audience broke into applause. Not thunderous yet, but sharp, undeniable. Even those who had come skeptical couldn't help themselves. The truth was cutting through the noise. Waters tried again, stammering half a line, but Crockett's timing was impeccable. She let him flounder just long enough, then dropped her next line with a smile that bordered on playful. Jesse, I know you love the sound of your own voice, but I think America's ready to hear mine for a change. Laughter erupted now, spilling over into clapping, into cheers. Waters shifted in his seat, his hands fidgeting with the stack of papers in front of him. His famous smirk slipped, just for a moment, and the cameras caught it. Crockett leaned in closer, her eyes locked on his. You interrupt me because you're afraid of what happens if I finish. Because if I finish, people see you for what you really are, a man more invested in performance than in truth. And the truth, Jesse, is that this country is tired of being interrupted. Now the audience was on their feet. Applause thundered across the studio. Some people even whistled, chanting her name under the noise. The energy had flipped completely. Waters, face flushed, He tapped his pen nervously, forced a chuckle, and muttered, "Oh, come on," but his voice cracked beneath the roar. Crockett wasn't done. She had led them through humor, through facts, through the cutting mirror of hypocrisy. Now she reached for the heart, for the moral clarity that turned her words into history. I sit here tonight not just as Jasmine Crockett the Congresswoman, but as Jasmine Crockett the daughter, the granddaughter, the attorney who has had to fight her way into every room where people like you said I didn't belong. And let me be clear, every interruption I faced, in courtrooms, in committee hearings, in conversations just like this one, only sharpened me. Every attempt to silence me has only made my voice stronger, and right now, in this moment, you don't just hear me. You hear everyone who's ever been told to stay quiet. The room erupted. Some audience members jumped from their seats, clapping with both hands high in the air. The moderator glanced at the producers off stage, as if to ask if they should cut to commercial, but nobody dared to stop the moment. Waters shifted again, his smile gone, his jaw tight. His eyes darted around, scanning the room for a lifeline. None came. And then Crockett delivered the line, the one that silenced not only him but the entire studio. Her voice cut through with precision, a sentence so clean, so devastating, that it needed no build-up, no defense. So go ahead, interrupt me 9 times if you want. But it only takes me one sentence to end you. The crowd gasped, then roared. Applause thundered so loud it shook the stage. Some were laughing in disbelief, others cheering with fists in the air. The moderator leaned back, stunned. Waters sat frozen, his lips parted, but no words coming out. His fidgeting stopped, his hands went still. He had been shut down. Live on air, with one sentence. Crockett leaned back, composed, almost serene, as if she had simply stated a fact. She didn't gloat, didn't bask. The silence between her words carried more power than any insult could. And in that silence, the truth was undeniable. The man who lived off interruptions had been interrupted by history itself. But the real explosion wasn't in the studio, it was everywhere else. The moment the words left Jasmine Crockett's lips, the studio felt it, but outside those walls, the shockwaves had only begun. Within minutes, the clip was clipped, snipped, and blasted across every corner of the internet. On Twitter, or X, as it was now called, the hashtags exploded. #Crockett shuts down Waters. #10th sentence. #Mic drop moment. They trended not just in Washington, not just in America, but globally. People posted the clip with captions like, "This is how you handle a bully." Others slowed it down, zooming in on Waters' expression as the smirk slipped away. TikTok filled with remixes, Crockett's line layered over music drops, over sports highlights, over movie scenes where the villain finally gets what's coming. Young people shared it as a meme. Older voters passed it along as proof that dignity still had a voice. Instagram Reels showed her sentence flashing in bold letters across the screen, set to thunderous applause tracks. On Reddit, entire threads dissected the exchange, some calling it the single greatest televised shutdown of the decade. Every corner of the digital landscape was buzzing. And it wasn't just ordinary users fueling the fire. Celebrities weighed in. Kerry Washington tweeted, "That's how you do it, sis." Mark Ruffalo reposted the clip with the caption, "Truth greater than noise." Even unlikely voices chimed in, a country singer from Texas posting, "Didn't agree with everything she said, but man, that was a knockout." Commentators scrambled to react. Cable news replayed the clip on an endless loop, each network giving it its own spin. On CNN, pundits hailed Crockett as a rising star who had out-debated the interrupter king. On MSNBC, they celebrated it as a watershed moment for women in politics. Even Fox News couldn't avoid showing it, though their framing tried desperately to paint it as out-of-context drama. Still, the clip spoke louder than any spin could. Politicians noticed too. Progressive leaders praised her for standing her ground, saying she represented a new generation unafraid to confront old tactics. Some moderates, even those often hesitant to weigh in on media spats, admitted privately that they were impressed by her composure, and quietly, a few Republicans muttered that Waters had done more damage to himself than any opponent could. But perhaps the most powerful reaction wasn't from elites, it was from the audience at home. Viewers who had felt silenced in their own workplaces, in their own classrooms, in their own conversations saw themselves in Crockett. Every interruption she endured mirrored the interruptions they had faced in meetings, at dinner tables, in Debates where their voices were dismissed, and when she finally shut it down with one line, it felt like they had shut it down to asterisk across social feeds. People posted their own stories. This reminded me of when my boss tried to cut me off for the 10th time, and I finally told him off. Or, as a young Latina, I felt that in my soul. Crockett's sentence had transformed from a debate retort into a rallying cry. A symbol of standing tall against arrogance, asterisk for hours, then days. The moment lived everywhere. Morning shows opened with it. Late-night comedians wrote monologues around it. Memes plastered Waters' stunned face next to captions like "When you realize interruptions won't save you." Kids in high schools repeated the line as a joke to their teachers, while activists used it as a chant at rallies, asterisk end. Yet, beneath all the noise, there was something deeper. This wasn't just another viral clip destined to fade. There was weight in it. The sense that a cultural shift had been crystallized in 10 sentences, the last of which shattered the old playbook, asterisk because for years, interruption had been the weapon, a way to dominate without substance, to silence without winning. But Crockett's line proved interruption had limits. It proved that clarity, delivered with dignity and precision, could cut through louder than any barrage of noise. Waters' brand of arrogance had met its match. Not in volume, but in truth, and the internet, for once, wasn't just laughing. It was applauding, asterisk, yet the true victory wasn't just trending, it was timeless. In the aftermath of that unforgettable clash, as the noise of social media swelled and the headlines multiplied, the true meaning of Jasmine Crockett's moment began to crystallize. What had started as a televised shouting match revealed itself to be something far more profound, a confrontation between the forces that had been battling for years in American life: arrogance and dignity, noise and truth, silencing and resistance. Asterisk Waters' interruptions were not just rudeness, they were symbolic. Each cut-off represented the countless ways voices, especially women's voices, minority voices, and inconvenient voices of truth, are dismissed in public life. Every smirk, every interruption carried the weight of a broader culture of silencing. Too many watching. It wasn't just Crockett he was trying to diminish, it was them. Asterisk, but Crockett's response flipped that symbolism on its head. Her calm persistence, her refusal to rise to the bait, her steady composure under the weight of 9 interruptions, that was resistance. It wasn't resistance through shouting louder or matching insult for insult. It was resistance rooted in dignity. She reminded the nation that strength is not always found in domination, but in refusing to be broken. Asterisk her sentence, the 10th, the one that shut him down, did more than silence a pundit. It reframed the very nature of leadership. Too often, people equate leadership with loudness, with spectacle, with the ability to drown others out. Waters embodied that approach: command the room through interruption, seize control through noise. But Crockett embodied another path: clarity over chaos, truth over theatrics. Asterisk leadership, she showed, is not about the number of times you can talk over someone. It's about the weight of your words when you finally choose to speak. It's about holding steady when the storm rages around you, and then cutting through it with precision. Asterisk her moment resonated because it was not just political theater, it was personal. Viewers felt in their bones the times they'd been silenced, dismissed, interrupted, and they saw what it looked like to rise above it. Crockett's victory wasn't only hers. It was a victory for every voice that had been told to sit down or stay quiet. Asterisk, and when she delivered her line, she handed that victory to the people. She didn't simply shut down Jesse Waters, she shut down a culture of arrogance that thrives on silencing. She gave proof that dignity, even in the face of relentless disrespect, could still win. Asterisk, the lesson was simple, but unforgettable. Leadership isn't about drowning out others. It isn't about filling the room with noise. Leadership is about the ability to hold your ground, to speak with clarity, to choose dignity even when arrogance surrounds you. Asterisk, that is why her moment stuck, because in a political era defined by shouting matches, insults, and viral put-downs, Crockett reminded America of something timeless. The loudest voice in the room isn't always the strongest. The truest voice is. Asterisk, and in that spirit, her climax line became a mantra, repeated again and again across screens and conversations. Asterisk, and with one sentence, she proved that truth speaks louder than arrogance. Asterisk, that was more than a closing statement. It was a lesson for politics, for workplaces, for classrooms, for dinner tables. It was a reminder that interruptions may silence for a moment, but they cannot extinguish the power of truth spoken with dignity. Asterisk, and that truth, once unleashed, echoes far beyond a studio debate. It becomes timeless. Asterisk, in the end, What the world witnessed wasn't just a fiery TV clash between Jesse Waters and Jasmine Crockett. It was something deeper. Something that reached far beyond the walls of a studio. Crockett may have shut him down, but the real story was bigger than politics. This was a moment where respect destroyed arrogance, where clarity crushed chaos, and where truth cut through the noise. Her victory wasn't scripted, and it wasn't staged. It was earned through patience, persistence, and a single sentence that reminded us all of the power of dignity. And in that moment, it stopped being just her win. It became a win for everyone who has ever been interrupted, dismissed, or underestimated. Because when Crockett stood her ground, she wasn't only defending herself. She was defending all of us, every voice that deserves to be heard, every truth that deserves to break through, every person who knows that silence doesn't mean weakness. It means waiting for the right time to strike with clarity. And that's why this moment matters, because it showed that arrogance can be loud, but it cannot last. Respect, on the other hand, echoes long after the shouting stops. So now, the story is in your hands. This wasn't just her victory, it was all of ours. If you felt that power, if you saw yourself in her moment, then be part of the movement. Subscribe for more stories that defend truth over arrogance. Share this video to remind others that dignity always wins. And carry this lesson into your own life. Never let noise silence your voice. Because sometimes all it takes is one sentence to change everything.